Good evening, everyone. It is my pleasure tonight to be presenting a webinar on behalf of Therapy Ed about determining and developing certification exam preparedness, the role of course, assessment, and practice exams. I am Rita Fleming Castaldi, and I am Professor Emeritus at the University of Scranton. I'm Director of Occupational Therapy Education for Therapy Ed, and I'm the History Preservation Project Chairperson for the Occupational Therapy Leaders and Legacy Society, which is a definite passion project of mine. My background is that I've been an educator for 36 years, started adjuncting at NYU, and then moved into teaching 5 courses there, became a program director. And that's when I became a program director at Dominican College. And that's when I became involved with exam preparation, because the students came and were like, we're very, very anxious about this. Is there anything that you can do to help us make it better so we're not so anxious? And I have a philosophy in life that life is stressful enough without any undue stress to it. I was a family caregiver for many years and worked in community mental health. And I've learned that, we don't need to add extra stresses to our life. So if there's anything we can do to make exam preparation more doable and also more successful. You may have noticed that some of your brightest students, for those of you who are in accredited programs, sometimes struggle with the exams. And I have a separate video, a webinar that's on the Therapy Ed YouTube page about students who struggle. But I just want to emphasize the point that sometimes our brightest and best students struggle because we teach them to think of every nuance and every possibility. And then we give them a couple sentences and ask them to determine the best answer. And it's counterintuitive how they are enculturated both in their fieldwork and in their academic coursework. So my goal always in doing exam preparation for students was to help students who I knew would be good therapists and I would want treating my family member to succeed. And then in 1998, I started doing that in 1993 for my program. And then in 1998, Therapy Ed contacted me and asked me to work with the authors who had done the physical therapy review and study guide and they were professors at Boston University, and they provided mentorship to me. And from 98 to 2000, I worked on the first edition of the Therapy Ed Review and Study Guide, and then became an instructor, and the rest is history. So it is my privilege here tonight to share some resources and some information about how you can use your exams in your courses, and then also how you can use assessment exams and guide the students to use practice exams so they can succeed on the NBCOT exam. So before we begin, I just want to go over a few logistics. I have muted everyone's mic, but please do turn on your mic when we have our question and answer session and the open discussion. I will be leaving that towards the end because I know sometimes people have a time press and can only attend a formal presentation, which will be about an hour. So I want to make sure I get through all the formal points. However, if there is something that needs clarification and an immediate response, please do unmute yourself or raise your hand so that I am able to attend to that concern in a timely manner. I do ask that people use the chat box, and again, I'll go through it when we near the end. And also, though, when you go through, see if someone else has a similar request, and that will, allow us to get to more diverse questions and concerns. I do need to emphasize that Therapy Ed is not affiliated with the National Board for Certification of Occupational Therapy, the NBCOT. The NBCOT, as you know, is a registered trademark owned by the National Board for Certification of Occupational Therapy, and COTA and OTR are trademarks of the NBCOT. Okay, so what do I hope to accomplish tonight with you? What I want to do is make sure that you are able by the end to really know the fundamental differences in the purposes of course exams, assessment exams, and practice exams. I know I often get emails from people saying, we want to put more NBCOT-like items in our curriculum. And there's a time and place for that. And that's what I'm going to talk about. What is the purpose of a course exam versus an assessment exam, an NBCOT-like exam? I'm also going to be talking about principles of clinical reasoning and how they can be used to inform the construction and use of course exam items that are consistent with students' developmental levels, and also how knowledge of knowing what the NBCOT exam is like and the level of their questions, how it can help you decide when in your program is the best time to introduce those types of questions. I'm also going to briefly review how we need to be careful about how we support students' test-taking personalities. There are effective personalities for taking an objective exam, and then there are ineffective personalities that result in test-taking habits that can actually compromise students' certification exam success when they sit for their exam in Prometric. So I want to include that point in the presentation. And I want to basically emphasize how using sound pedagogy to really determine when and how to integrate assessment and practice exams into your curriculum. There's not a one-size-fits-all. So it really just requires discussion and knowledge of what your program is like, where your students are. And that's what I hope to have towards the end, also some more discussion after the formal presentation about that. I also want to make sure that you're able to know some concrete strategies and resources that you can use to help, identify graduates who may struggle. How do we, kind of, not target, but, put someone on our radar that we see maybe struggling in some areas or have personality that's not effective, or maybe needs accommodations, but don't need to use them in their academic program, but may need to use them in Prometrics, because we want to have that we really work with those students before their first attempt. I had a presentation, which for those of you who emailed me about the June 1st presentation not being available on Therapy Edge YouTube, I just received an email right before saying that it was back up. And during that, that was the June 1st presentation with Marlene, which will have a number of resources related to how you integrate exam preparation into your curriculum, and it's a curriculum and resource guide for developing programs and for accredited pre-accredited programs. So that was the June 1st webinar, which is now up on the website. And what has been on the website consistently is a webinar I did on November 15th with Christina from Mercy College PD and Doug from Massachusetts College of Pharmacy and Health Sciences. We had a CODA program director and OTR program director of an OTR program. And they talked about how they use resources and strategies so that they can help students before they take their exam. So I'm going to highlight that and refer you to that webinar for more information. And then how we can also make sure that we're using ethical, reliable, and effective resources. I had a program director contact me yesterday with a screenshot of the total TAM, which is, I'm not a biomechanical occupational therapist. My background was primarily in mental health, and also then disability rights and empowerment and community-based practice. So I know the principle of TAM about how you the total active motion, I think is what it stands for. But anyway, it's a mathematical formula as to what you measure and what you subtract, and we have it in our textbook. And they sent me a screenshot of information that was for an exam preparation project saying this doesn't agree with your book. And it was also a person whose student had come to them concerned that there was not an agreement. And it was wrong. I sent it, our book was right. And so someone had something out there that was completely the opposite of what should have been done. And there are many examples of that. So you want to make sure when students are using the resources, sometimes things that have the most bells and whistles are maybe not the best for them to use. Okay, so I want to talk about, okay, course assessment and practice exams. We put those terms out there a lot. So they all are objective exams, but they have very distinct foci related to when they are administered. Our course exams, they should be administered in the developmental stage of early to mid curriculum student. Okay, when students first enter OT, they have to learn the difference between proprioception and kinesthesia. They have to learn what volar is and dorsal is. Okay, they have to learn different spinal cord levels, different group levels. So the purpose of these is to really test to see, has the student acquired that foundational knowledge that is required for competent OT and OTA practice. And we use these course tests in our early to mid curriculum to determine, is the student capable to progress to more advanced courses when there's maybe not going to be tests. I know I taught for 17 years at the University of Scranton, I'm in the master's program. And the 5th year, because we were a 5-year program, the 5th year, the students never saw an objective exam because they were doing program plans, they were doing research, they were doing advocacy work, they were doing needs assessment and program plans. So in the early to mid curriculum student, we need to have course exams to see, are they ready to progress and have they mastered that foundational content? Assessment exams, which the most common one, as everyone knows, is the OT from NBCOT. I will be talking about an alternative, which is the one I developed for therapy ed. But that stage should be done when a student is very late in their curriculum, their final year, and they're near graduation. They're wrapping up. They should have at this point mastered all the foundational content they need for the NBCOT. And the purpose of the assessment exams is to determine how ready they are. And it should be towards the end of the program. Doing that beforehand, we already know, because in our curriculum, we have these other courses they have to do. We have the field works they have to do. So we already know that they still have to acquire some knowledge before they're going to be prepared for the exam. So it makes no sense to get those sooner. So they should really be in the very late curriculum, last semester or so, pre-field work, pre-capstone, or near graduate, very near graduation. Practice exams, developmental stage, should really be the exam candidate. And I purposely use the term exam candidate in this situation, because when someone is ready to take the NBCOT exam and when they're preparing for the exam, they're no longer a student. They have become eligible for the exams. The NBCOT does not consider them a student. They are considered an exam candidate. Whenever I mention that in any webinar I do to students, like for the student conclave or therapy ed courses, students get very excited about that. Wow, I'm not a student anymore. And it's true. Okay. So that should be the stage where they're doing practice exam. And the goal of that is to provide multiple opportunities for exam candidates to assess and apply their content knowledge, their critical and clinical reasoning, and their test taking and time management skills in a manner that accurately simulates their upcoming NBCOT exam. So I'm considering practice exams not like practice questions, where I can get an app or sign up and I do 10 questions here, I do 20 questions there, I do 30 questions there. Those are helpful, just like course exams are, to seeing, do I have the foundational knowledge? But to truly know if you're going to be ready for the NBCOT exam, you need to mimic the exam experience. So you need to take a 4-hour exam. And I'll talk more about what our practice exams are like, because they truly do mimic. Because I just do 10 questions here, 20 questions here for the OTR exam. If I do a CST here, a CST here, I really don't have the full lived experience of doing a 4-hour exam and have those activity demands of doing that unless I do it. Important thing to know, all practice exams are not equal. Poor quality exams can cause harm. Someone also sent me, people like to send me screenshots, a screenshot of an exam item that is commercially available for someone who promotes themselves as an exam prep company. And it was a CST item for the OTR exam, a sample. And it had a very complicated open scene, very complicated section, but okay, maybe could be tweaked a little, but the format was at least there. But then they had 6 options and they said, you need to pick 3 out of the 6. Well, that's not how the CST item is. The CST items, you have to pick yes or no to everything, and you can't change your answer once you pick yes or no. The 3 out of 6 is the multi-select item from the code exam. So this provider had combined the code exam with the OTR exam to compose this item, and it had no relevance to the exam whatsoever. So there is poor quality out there. And that can cause harm, because then the student is not aware of how they need to answer yes or no, and you can't change the answer, which is critical to maximize your points on that section. Okay, so you need to make sure good quality. And right from the start, I will say, very clearly, AOTA and NBCOT have quality products. So when anything I say about poor quality products does not relate to the AOTA and the NBCOT. Okay, so let's talk about the different levels of objective exam items and how they relate to students' developmental levels and how they relate to our course practice in the NBCOT exam. The very first basic level of objective exams are our knowledge base. Basically, our matching columns are very simple, pick this answer. And that's when we're testing the basic information. What is kinesthesia versus proprioception? What is apraxia versus aphasia? What is negative symptoms versus positive symptoms? Those are key things that are very knowledge-based. No NBCOT item is slowly at that matching column level. However, you have to know the difference between these terms and what they mean, okay? Because that's required for certification exam success. So our course exams have to test that foundational knowledge. So our prerequisites in OT 101 do matter. And it's important to remind students this information will be tested on the exam. But then we get to the little higher levels, comprehending that foundational knowledge. Comprehension is most appropriately and very often tested a lot of times through analysis of case studies and development of intervention and program plans. However, few, if any, NBCOT items will solely be at this level. So as students progress in their program, you may want to add a little more challenge, more comprehension types of things. However, if you don't master and understand the implications and nuances of that knowledge, you're going to probably have a difficult time with the exam. I like to, when I teach the course, use tenodesis, because tenodesis is very easy to memorize. I extend my fingers, flex. I flex my fingers, extend. And I explain to you, you can't just memorize that part, extension, flexion, flexion, extension. Okay, you can't just memorize that. That's easy because it's attached to your body. But you have to understand what this means for the excursion reflexive tendons, because then you have to understand that doing this, flattening pizza dough, flattening Play-Doh while you're playing with your kid, if you have a C6, C7 spinal cord injury, that would be contraindicated. So you have to understand what that knowledge means. And that's why our case studies and our lab activities are extremely important as a foundation to NBCOT exam success. The exam is primarily at the application and analysis level. So application is providing that foundation knowledge to apply theories, rules, and procedures to situations. So understanding AIR's SI theory approach and determining the most relevant intervention goals for a child with proprioceptive deficits. And then the next step is in applying that, like applying my knowledge of kinesthesia to an activity, and then knowing those interrelationships. So my relationships between my knowledge about sensory integration, tenodesis, grasp, but then analyzing an activity and getting that just right fit. What is going to be the best intervention for a child with proprioceptive deficits or an adolescent with a C6 spinal cord injury? And then that gets in there with, okay, adolescent, what would be age appropriate activity? So that's where the level of the NBCOT exam is at. And that is where good, effective practice exams are at. Okay. So thinking about levels of effective exams and their relation to the course and NBCOT exam items. So prior to being able to answer exam items at the application and analysis level, students, as I mentioned, must acquire those foundational knowledge and fully comprehend its implications. Prematurely testing students' application analysis skills. I know there sometimes I did a Conversations That Matters last year at Inspire, and I'm going to be doing another one this year. And people contact me, and I do sometimes, Zoom meetings with individual faculty members or teams of faculty members. And there's a presses, and particularly those of you in developing programs, because we have this press, they need to pass the exam for us to get accredited. We have to have our pass rate, and that's a real press. But if we do it too soon, it can really cause much undue angst, okay? Because they're still trying to master and understand the key concepts. So if you add in, say, now you're going to analyze activity, that may be better for a lab activity, okay? We don't need that undue angst. We want students to succeed and not be so stressed out in our program. However, conversely, not having sufficient test-taking experience can also increase exam stress. So it's finding that just right balance. So determine when and how to integrate higher levels exams into curriculum must be based on the understanding of where your students are at developmentally. And all programs will differ a bit. So how do we engage students in this process? And how do we test their development, test their practice competencies? Because that's going to be relevant on the exam. I think an important thing to always remember is that the NBCOT exam content is based on practice analyses. So it is based upon what therapists do in practice. So to make sure they have the knowledge and skills they need for competent entry-level practice and the knowledge and skills that will serve them well when they're on the NBCOT exam, when they have to take the NBCOT exam, you want to ensure that your course exams do include questions that test basic content and comprehensive of this information to ensure mastery of the knowledge. I did a presentation with the students who struggle presentation, and someone asked about, in their program, they do all open-ended book questions because they want to see how students, their critical reasoning is. And I understand that press, but I think we also need to know that students know something cold, okay? Because knowing and understand this must-know information is essential for exam success and for competent practice. I do need to know the difference between someone who's C5 and a C7. I do need to know the impact of no proprioception on someone's function and how that does. So memorization is required just even to be effective and timely in practice. I can't keep looking everything up in the book. I have to know things, where to add to and where to subtract to for standard wheelchair measurement. How wide should the doorway be? So that does help with, competent practice, that I'm going to be efficient and effective. And of course, we want to be aware we're going to do nuance when it's a real person, not an exam. But memorization is also required to pass the NBCOT exam within the allotted time if the candidate's not eligible for accommodations. What often happens, unfortunately, when we give our course exams, we often give a full test period, or if it's quiz, half the test period. By nature, that often automatically is extended time, according to like how much time NBCOT says is the average that people take to answer an exam item. To answer an exam item on multiple choice item on the NBCOT exam is an average of a little bit over a minute. It varies from year to year. Sometimes it's a minute and 4 seconds, a minute and 11 seconds, a minute and 11 seconds, but not much, not like a minute and a half per item. If you think about the number of items you give in a class and then how much time you give students, it is almost embedded extra time in that typically. So I can sit there and I can think, what was that third bullet point in that PowerPoint presentation? When Isabel presented her PowerPoint or her, what was that third picture that she showed? I don't have time to think about that and think about my handwritten notes and the pictures and the bullet points. I need to know right away that a universal cuff is someone with C5, a tenodesis splint and tenodesis grasp is C67. I don't need to be spending time trying to remember a PowerPoint presentation. Otherwise, you will run out of time. You will run out of time. So my suggestion is do incorporate closed book objective items into exams that also include open book, open-ended, and open book questions. We can blend it together. When I first started teaching at NYU, I had the privilege of having Ann Mosey as my mentor. And she helped me learn how to design tests. And she often very much pushed, have the objective questions for the things they need to memorize, they must know, but then how do you take that information and have some open-ended questions. So that was always a style that I was very comfortable with. So you also wanted to make sure they develop knowledge and skills they need, provide them with the opportunity to explain their selected course exam answers and demonstrate their clinical and critical reasoning skills on an objective exam. So you can have, okay, you had choices between these 4 items, then have a little open-ended thing. Can you please explain your reasoning for why you selected your item? Rather than having them raise their hand in class and say, well, I had C, but I was between C and B, but I picked B because of this. Now that's really, really good. And I love students who do that because it shows that they're going to be a reflective practitioner. They're not going to do the same thing each week just because, in mental health, because it's Tuesday and that's when we do this group. They're going to be reflective. They're going to think when they raise their hand. But NBCOT doesn't take phone calls on Monday to say it could have been B. So rather than allowing them to debate the question, have them explain their reasoning on, being an open-ended question or a post-exam review of correct and incorrect answers. That was something that I was also very enculturated into, was that when you give out a test, you just don't give someone and give them the grade, that you should give the opportunity to review, particularly when there's a question that has 2 answers that people were picking. Okay, to say to them, well, why is this one more right than the other? What I always like to do, and I find this is very helpful when I do the therapeutic course, when there's a controversial question where people don't agree with the answer, I often say to the person who got it, who answered correctly, say, can you explain your reasoning? And I find when students listen to each other, it facilitates peer-to-peer learning, but also makes it more like, well, you didn't write that question right, or this should be clearer type of thing that sometimes occurs. Well, your peer understood and got that and picked that nuance up or picked that important point or remembered that important point. So even if you don't have a lot of time to go through an entire exam, I would definitely say like the top 5 questions that are real teachable moments as to why one answer is more correct, to make that time. It really is invaluable. So whether it's done during a course tutorial review session or electronic chat, I know I don't want to call out the school in case I say the wrong school, but there was a school that was a developing program and I met with them before they became pre-accredited, talk about how exam prep could be integrated into their curriculum. And one of the things that they wind up deciding when I talked about this point is they set up an electronic chat where people could put in why amongst themselves, a group chat, why one answer was more right than the other. And it wound up peer-to-peer learning that occurred electronically. It wound up the professor, when she joined it, after everybody was required to put in a comment, after she reviewed it, it wound up during the course, all she had to say, that was a great discussion. And Jennifer, you nailed it. And Gary, you also nailed it. And does anybody have any follow-up questions? And it was very, very time efficient, but also really facilitate clinical reasoning, critical thinking, which was fantastic, but also enculturated a very good habit of, of exam taking that I can't argue to say another answer is better because I like it. So how do we strike that balance with the Just Right challenge to move people beyond the basic course exams? My thought is add 1 or 2 details for a few exam items. Not in your first really 101 entry level where they're mastering knowledge, but then maybe in your practice courses. Add 1 or 2 details. Too many items with too many details is overwhelming and again causes undue stress, because we don't want students to be stressed out when they're first taking an exam, because we don't want to even have that kind of panic association with exams. One thing that students often say is, I'm a terrible test taker. My response is always, you can't be a terrible test taker, because to even get into OT school, you had to pass a lot of exams. It may not be in your comfort zone, but you can't be a terrible test taker if you actually have, gotten to this point. So our goal is to make students that they want to be in this field, and we want them to learn competency for practice. So we don't need to have undue stress with our exams. So strategically integrate those comprehensive exams that mirror and a couple questions in their content and format towards the end. So if you are going to do like a comprehensive exam, have it just towards the end of the program. That really is sufficient. Students will have enough opportunities to practice taking certification-like exams once they become exam candidates. They can take the therapy exam prep course. They can take the class cohort assessment exams. Our review and study guides have 3 complete exams, so 12 hours worth of exams. And we even have an exam in the week, and that's just therapy ed, not counting, NBCOT and AOT. There's so many opportunities. In fact, sometimes too many. It makes people anxious because there's so many choices. All right. I also wanted to talk briefly about striking balance, how we can support student success without enabling ineffective habits. Many test takers have established personalities that can hinder success. The rusher, they're out the door and you're wondering, people are wondering, do they have the same test? Turtle, can I have 5 more minutes? 5 more minutes. The philosopher, who is the one who says, well, what about this? What about this? The lawyer who argues the case, which I really love lawyers. I'm a New Yorker and I love the lawyer personality because they're going to be our patient advocates and our client advocates. The person who second guesses and changes their actions. And then the squishy procrastinator who pushes off and, just does things to the very last minute. I would always know when you get a paper form that a student handed in because they've just printed it out right before class. These may unknowingly be supported because we're caring. We want to give that person 5 more minutes so they can succeed on the exam. We want to encourage people, debating something and thinking critically. So they may be unknowingly supported or they may be knowingly supported. So common ways these personalities are supported include allowing for that debate and giving credit for alternative answer, because that then is a reward factor there. Giving extended time that's not an ADA accommodation. So yeah, okay, I don't have my meeting until 1 o'clock. You can stay until 1:45 and have 15 minutes extra. And taking maybe a penalty for a late submission, but never really questioning them and saying, if you're always procrastinating with this, that's not going to bode well for your exam preparation. So we may want to address this sooner rather than later. Because a very important thing to consider is the different activity demands and the environmental context between course exams and the NBCOT exam, okay? So the activity demands of course exams, usually it's well-defined course content. It's a pediatric class, 1 week reflexes, 1 week fine motor, 1 week gross motor. So there's limited cognitive shifts during that exam. And at the end, when there's a cumulative exam, it's just on peds and all the things I've been testing quizzes. So there's limited cognitive shifts. And again, the comprehensive ones are things I've already gotten feedback for. And it's usually in a multiple choice, which is a very familiar format. The NBCOT exam measures everything, okay? The whole world of OT land. Numerous cognitive shifts are required. Each multiple choice item has a unique focus. So there's 200 cognitive shifts on the code exam and 170 cognitive shifts on the OTR exam, not counting all the cognitive shifts in the 3 CSTs. Okay. And those are very novel. The CSTs are novel type of questions that students aren't used to. And the NBCOT 6 options, select 3, also is novel, and it presents very different challenges than a course exam. And the environment is different. When I take an exam related to my courses, it's either at home, now we do them electronically a lot, or in my dorm room, okay, or in a classroom. And if I'm in a classroom, a lot of times I can, go in and pick my favorite seat as soon as the room is available. And there's people around me who are all taking the same exam. Very different environmental press. Prometrics, it's unfamiliar. You have to do a security check-in. You're not going to get to self-select your computer station. And there's all sorts of strangers taking very diverse tests within very different time frames. There's exterminate exams, real estate exams, so people are up and going at all different times and writing, typing a GRE. So the activity demands and environmental context of the NBCOT exam is a really important reason why squishes and procrastinate, why it doesn't work for them. Okay, because all these different cognitive shifts and the environment, and also why testing combinations should be attained if needed. Very, very different activity demands and environmental context between course and NBCOT exams. And it's important to let students know. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about clinical reasoning, how we apply them to exam items, because it can also help you strengthen your course exams. Basically, determine correct answers to both course exams. NBCOT exam items require the application of clinical reasoning. And the NBCOT is directly from the OTR content outline, and the CODA content outline also has the exact same requirement that we need to know how to use clinical reasoning and therapeutic use of self. And these are hints that we have throughout the book, and I'll talk about these a little bit later, about how, of course, the book content ties into NBCOT content outline. So early in students' academic career, it should really be procedural reasoning, okay, which is the by the book answers. As knowledge base grows, you can include more interactive, conditional, and pragmatic reasoning, but they should only be tested after foundational knowledge has been established. So after they've effectively applied the procedural reasoning, correctly answered knowledge and comprehensive questions, subtly introduce details, again, like 1, max 2 details, to encourage them to use different higher levels of clinical reasoning. So the details include is like the stage of the OT process, screening, discharge, initial treatment plan, the practice setting, acute care versus home care versus school-based practice, the person's valued roles and activities, if the activity is about someone feeding their child versus someone painting, put that little nuance in there. And then the developmental level, is it an adolescent, is it an older adult, is it a toddler? Okay. Now, I know people always want to know more about effective exam item construction, so I do have a save the date here. Dr. Kara Inda, who, as I mentioned, did her dissertation about critical reasoning used for exam success, will be presenting a webinar on constructing items to enhance academic certification exam performance on Friday, April 28th. During this webinar, she's going to talk about high stakes examination items, how to deconstruct multiple choice items, and how to construct multiple choice items that elevate critical thinking, and what are the features of well-constructed multiple choice items. The really cool session about Carrie's presentation, she has a pre-recorded webinar about how to construct items in an effective manner. And when we send out the invitation and the save the date, which I will send out, it includes the link to that webinar. So what she does is encourage everybody to review that webinar before her live session, so it can be much more engaging. And she doesn't have to go over that foundational information. I'll be sending that out at least 2 weeks before April 28th. And actually, probably when I send the thank you with this recording, once I have the recording back, I can include that information also. If you are not a program director or have not received previous emails from me, please do email me at rpcot1904@gmail, and I'll put you on my mailing list. Okay, so let's talk about assessment exams. Again, the most common one is the OTKI. I'm going to talk about our online assessment exams because I think they have qualities that actually have advantages over the OTKI. The OTKI is an ethical product, but I do think, and I know program directors, how we developed this was program directors were asking for an alternative. So I've spent a number of years now developing this based upon feedback from program directors. We do have 2-hour online. There are assessment exams of 2 hours because that's the amount of time that people said they could fit, often by doing it in a class. But for students with disabilities, that can be taken in time and a half or double time. They're purposely designed to mirror the 4-hour NBCOT exam. So we have 2 of them. Each of them is half of a full NBCOT exam. I spent a lot of time. There was initially an initial version that I was not a participant in. So that one that came out in 2020 did not have as many diverse items as we thought it should be. So we revamped it completely. So if you haven't seen our OLX since 2020, please do give it a look-see because it is significantly better. That's the developmental process, right? So they are diverse in their critical reasoning and content foci, and they accurately reflect the NBCOT domain percentages. So for the code exam, 17% for domain 3. For the OTR exam, 15% for domain 4. And I made sure everything is in the percentages. And I also made sure that there's at least 10 questions in each of the main 9 content areas that we have. They are available for free for your first group cohort. And after that, they are priced at $20 per student. So because I said it's half, the OTA OLX will have 100 single response and the 6 option multi-select items to reflect half of the 200 item. And the OLX is, okay, that's a good question. The OLXs are only for program directors, okay? They are an assessment and they are exclusively available. Sorry, I went over that too quickly. They're exclusively available only to education programs because they're meant to be an assessment exam. We do have practice exams that go with our book that students have access to, 3 full ones, but this is exclusively only for program directors for a specific class cohort. Thank you for reminding me to clarify that. Okay. And the OT OLX has 1.5 clinical simulation items and 85 multiple choice to reflect that on the main CST, on the full exam, there's 3 CSTs and 170. I did design them that the 2 OLXs can be combined for a full certification exam simulation experience. So the 85 and 85 is 170. And I purposely made that the simulation test item, the 1.5, what was the 0.5 one? The next 2 sections follow from that in a logical sequence, but they could also be standalone. So the exams can be standalone. And a lot of times what people have been doing is giving one at one point in the curriculum and then one at a different point. So people have been doing this post-academic coursework and pre-field work, pre-therapy exam prep course, post-course, or a very common thing is pre-field work, post-academic, before field work, therapy ed course, and then after the course is often a sequence also. So there is that ability. And I'm also, as I said, available to talk to people individually as how it best fits in your curriculum. Okay, so that's the assessment exam. And as I mentioned, that's only available to programs and program directors. But we do have 3 online practice exams that simulate a complete NBCOT exam. So 3 complete exams that accompany our review and study guide. And they're online and they are meant to be taken. Students can take them in portions, but we really encourage them in the course and in the book to take them as a full exam to really practice their time management skills. So the exams in the OT review and study guide include 3 complete CST items, so 9 of those, and 170, 180 multiple choices for, so 510, 170, yeah. Did I do my math right? Anyway, 510 multiple choice items. Yeah, that's right. For in the OTR practice exams. And for the OTA book, there's 200 items. And again, they include the single response and 6 option for a total of 600 items. And again, for just like our assessment exams, they can be extended and take more extended time for students with disabilities. Also in our online portal, that's where they go to access the online exams. Students get a code with the book. There also is the opportunity for them to take quizzes and mini content specific quizzes and mini exam that are 50 multiple choice that are pulled from the practice exams from the multiple choices. So they can really help someone say, have I mastered the content after studying the chapter? What is, if my score report shows a weakness in certain areas, let me test myself again, and to see if my study plan is complete. Each quiz gets the same detailed performance as the practice exams, and I'll be showing you the score reports in a minute, which I think is one of our strengths. These sometimes can also be used, if someone integrates the book into their curriculum. So what are some of the things with our assessment exams, the OLXs as we call them, and our practice exams that contribute to efficacy? First of all, that we do, none of our exams are just multiple choice or just 3 to 4 option multiple choices. I know there are practice exams that others sell, including NBCOT, where it's just, 100 multiple choices. And even for the COTA, 100, 3 or 4 option multiple choices, not the 6 option. And those are $30 an exam. To get the CST items, you need to spend, buy that separately. And to get 180, you have to buy 2 of the exams and get 200 questions. So all of our exams, the assessment exams and the practice exams, are the complete picture, okay, that reflect and consistent with the NBCOT exam. So that gives the students a very valid and useful certification exam simulation experience. It lets them test their content knowledge and time management strengths and limitations while answering both types of the OTR and or the COTA questions, not just standard multiple choices, before they take their exam with Prometrics. The other thing I'd like to emphasize is all exam items are authored by OT and OTA educators who are recognized experts in the field. They contribute to our book. They're FAOT members, FAOT honorees. They are program directors. They are authors, and they all actualize our profession's highest standards. And our team, item ranking team, is led by Dr. Inda. And they really know and understand the content, question level, format, and expectations of the OTR and COTA exam because they're also therapy course instructors. So they work with students quite a bit. Okay, as an assessment exam, though, the OLX can only be accessed once and taken once. It's just an assessment, one time, just like the NBCOT AKI. But the review and study guides are designed to be integrated in an exam preparation plan. So once activated, access is maintained for 18 months. There's no limit on how number of times these exams can be taken, which can be quite helpful to students who maybe have complexities and their exam preparation plan has to be really spread out. So you don't have to worry about once I take it once, I can't take it again, as in other products that has one and done. It is open for the students. Okay. Because to ensure their knowledge tests are accurately assessed, we make sure we give them clear directions and instructions. That is one of the biggest complaints I've had about other products is students didn't know how to answer, the CST items. There's no directions there. The select 3 out of 6. So I made very, very sure that our directions, and I'll have screenshot of it, that, the introduction to the exams positively sets a positive stage. So they're not going to be nervous and be anxious about the unknown. They know what to expect. And this is basically the screenshot from the OT online assessment exam and from the OTA online assessment exam. So again, it gives you a very clear introduction that it tells you, okay, what is the multiple choice and 6 options. So they're not going to be surprised when they see that different thing. Okay. It tells them how it's going to be scored. Okay. And it gives step-by-step instructions for the different types. So they know that their knowledge is being assessed, not that they didn't understand how to answer the different distinct types of exam items. So, and in the practice exams, we do the same thing. Okay. We have this welcome, and then we have the directions. Okay, so I'm going to show screenshots of the directions. So this is the screenshots that go with the OT assessment exam. So our version of the alternative to the AKI. So it tells you exactly, simulation test items to reflect this format, strengths and weakness, time sets the introduction. But then this is the part I'm very proud of. These are the directions they get before they enter into the exam. So it tells you that, has 1 section and 1-2 section. It explains that clearly so they know. Each can be sent multiple decisions. You must select yes or no. You cannot leave any blanks. You cannot change your answer. So the students really know what to expect. And it's going to tell you this is followed. Okay. I also give a hint that help them do as best as they can, which is a hint we share in the course. They read everything first before you select. Something that seems yes in the beginning may actually be no when you see subsequent action that's a better choice. Okay. Am I going to do 2 ADL evals? No. But which is the better ADL eval? One is yes, one is no. And you gain points for correct yes, correct no. So I really strove here to make sure that's very clear. so they know what to expect. And this is an example of a simulation test item, okay? And opening scene, the section, and here's my yes or no. We model again, the feedback will pop up when I check yes. For time, I'm not going to have you read this, but I am going to here. The very nice part is we don't let them go on, just like the NBCOT. So here, these are the things they said yes to, and here the feedback is. And here's the thing they select no to. You don't get no because you didn't do it. But I didn't select anything for here, and it's highlighting. I need to select yes or no for this option before I can move on. So the directions are very clear. So again, when you get the score report, it's not that the students were confused with the exam. It's based upon their content knowledge and their test taking skills. Okay, it also lets know once you end, you can't go back. And then it describes how to do the multiple choices. Okay, don't skip it. Okay, even if you're uncertain, there are no penalties. Make an educated guess. And talks about the strike through and highlight and mark for review features. The same type of thing is on the OTA exam. It tells them exactly what they need to do, and selecting this to 3 out of 6 that you must select them. No partial credits. They have their directions. And again, it gives that same type of directions at how best to answer multiple choices, and don't leave a blank. Similarly, we have very clear directions. This person only selected 2. It's letting them know you must select 3. Okay, so we provide very, very clear guidance to maximize students' performance. Okay, so what are some of the features that also impact their efficacy is our score reports. Each test taker receives a detailed professional score report. Okay, yeah, Elizabeth, there is the strikeout feature. We did not do the highlight feature, and I purposely made that decision based upon what I know about what students have told me about the exam. 2 things with the highlight. It takes time to highlight. Strikeout is easy. Just click the thing to strike it out. But highlight, you actually have to highlight. It's very individualized. And one problem is if you're highlighting the CST items and you accidentally sneeze, like how my mouse, when I'm going to move forward, or when I go to the chat box, it moves forward, and you pick yes and you wanted to pick no, you can't change your answer. I've also had students say they over highlighted and they ran out of time, because it does take time. We teach the students in our course to use scrap paper and also learn to deconstruct in your head. We teach like, what's the setting? What's the stage of the process? What's the main presenting symptoms? They go bump, bump, bump. So they have a very strategic approach to deconstructing the questions so they don't have to highlight. So we don't do highlighting, but we do strikeout. And that just was the thing, because I didn't want to encourage that behavior, because it has proved not an effective thing for most students. Okay, not all, but a lot of students have had trouble with that as a time management issue. Okay, I hope that answered your questions out, and I can talk about that more in a little bit. Each test taker gets a detailed personal and confidential report, and I think that's very important. There is a product, I attended the New York State OT Association Student Conclave, and there was another provider there, and they actually put up from their practice exams the scores of 15 students with their names. They were actual people's names and their scores. We don't do that. Everything is personal and confidential, goes directly to student, no one else. Okay, and these are the categories, and I'll show screenshots of that. It tells them how much it took to complete, time they took to complete the exams. They see, and their incorrect answers, that then they go directly linked to the rationales in the book. So it really lets them serve as a diagnostic tool to know their content knowledge and time management. And this can really help them do a targeted exam preparation plan. And again, since the exams come with the book, chapter 2 in the book gives a lot of information on how to do an exam prep plan, even if someone doesn't take our course. So this is what it looks like. Now, this was me. I clearly went too fast. Okay. But basically I got 72%, which is actually a very solid score. I answered things that I knew well, and I basically around more with things I didn't know. But I want to highlight how helpful the score report is. Because here you see I did very poorly in human development and aging, very poorly in musculoskeletal, and poorly in cardiopulmonary. But I did really good in the process of OT. I did really good in psychiatry, really good in areas of occupation, really good in environmental, and really good in professional standards and responsibilities. This was a CODA exam. So this really helps me target what I need to study. And here's the contrast. We also do say, what is your domain scores? Okay, and again, now this one is a different screenshot for the OTR one. But I had a similar thing. I just wanted to show an OTR versus a CODA. I have diverse screenshots. But my scores was very similar in the OTR because I know what I know and I know what I don't know. So looking at this, it looks like I'm pretty almost the same in all the domains except third one. But yet my content knowledge is very skewed in 3 areas. If all I had gotten from the OTKey or an NBCOT or other practice exams that only include domain, I would not know what to study. Do I need to study intervention management in psych? No, because my score was good in that. And biomechanical? Most definitely. Okay. So this is where the real strength comes in. And then the reasoning scores. And I'll talk about how these scores can be used by students in a minute. Okay. So when students get this category score report, they're encouraged, and you should encourage them to basically study the chapters that coincide. So this is the CODA book. These are the categories. And then these are the chapters. So you know right away. So I know if this is C3, I got 4. These are the chapters I need to study. If I got C5, these are the chapters I need to study. I did really good in this. I don't need to look at chapter 3 anymore. I don't need to look at chapter 15 or 16, and I don't need to look at chapter 4, okay? Because I did very well in those. So it really helps for a targeted study plan. Okay, if students' domain scores are low, they should be advised to review the exam hints in Therapy's Ed review and study guides. These hints directly relate how the chapter content relates to the exam domains, with a focus on the task skills and knowledge statements that are in the content outlines. So we encourage people to prioritize. Everybody who buys our books and take our courses, we say review the content outlines. We highlight the content outline throughout our book, but also they can go online and review them. Okay. The other thing, if students have that their critical reasoning is low, we encourage them to go to chapter 2. Yes, I'll be talking about the program director's report in a minute. This is what the students get. And I'm talking about the utility for the students. I'll show the program director's report, which is also quite good. So the students get their own private one through the portal, and then the program director will get one directly to you for your cohort. And I'll show that next. And this is how the student then can learn to use that. So what I'm trying to emphasize is that for your students, these practice exams and the OLXs, because they get the same information, and those were the OLXs that I took, can help them hone in on what they need to work on. And that is much more efficient than just the 4 domains. So here's your program director score report. You get a comprehensive report about your program, each class cohort, so the first cohort, and then when you have other cohorts, you'll get the other cohort reports, and each individual student score performance also, okay? And where they fit into the quartile, okay? And you get the same information, okay? The domains, the content knowledge. It also tells you the amount of time a student took to complete the exam and the number of items that were answered, that they answered. It does also divide them up. We ask students, did they do it before completing their fieldwork or at the end of their program? So just make sure that students haven't completed their program and evaluate separately. So here's an example, okay? So this, everybody took it out before going out on the first level one, okay? So, and this, it goes into, this was the highest, it's the lowest, they would actually have a name here, and it gives you that information, okay? Then the really important thing for program planning is it tells you how your students did in all these. Now, an important thing to know about this, because I actually have to ask someone to send me a new screenshot of this stuff, but this was sent by a screenshot of a program director in 2020. So this was before we made sure that there were enough items in categories. That was not, 2 items was not valid for assessing cognitive perceptual. So we now have, again, there's 9 categories. We have at least 100 multiple choices. We have at least 10 items in each. Okay, and then for the CST also we average that in to make it fair. But you can see this was when they took it before they went out on field work and the students hadn't studied. So the scores are very low. But even in this, I could see this is covered well. This is covered pretty good. This is really low, and this is really low again. So I look and prioritize. And the best part is when you get more cohorts, you can start to see a trend. This is what you get. I blanked out all of the students' names. Now, this was because it was done before they went on fieldwork. The program decided to do it as an untimed test. So you can see a lot of people took it, more than 2 hours, but that's understanding they had studied. But this person here, 4 hours and 23 minutes, and they only completed, 60% of the exam and 18%, correctly. This is clearly someone who needs to be flagged to say what's going on, and particularly if they have not declared a disability. Okay, this person went, so you could start to see who does better, who doesn't, who did not so well. This is after 4 hours, only a raw score of 24. This person had 80, doing pretty good. So you really get very detailed information. You'll also get a summative of, again, this tells you the percentage. This is another way it is presented, so you can see where your program is strong or weak. Again, the domains, but this then gives me, and again, if your students take the exam when they're studying, I'll talk about temporal context in a minute. This will usually be more varied, not all such low scores, but again, the students in this cohort had not studied. So the comprehensive information provided can help you identify students who need additional support or skill development in their critical reasoning, content knowledge, test taking, and time management skills, help you really hone in. See how your cohort is doing as a whole. Look for performance patterns across classes and program cohort. And it can really help you see where your strengths and limitations are, so you can look at your course development and curriculum to inform certification exam success. In the June 1st webinar that I did with Marlene talked about how she used information from analyzing using therapy as review and study guide for curriculum review, and how they realized they weren't at University of Scranton, they were not covering cognition enough. And they realized they needed to improve the content on cognition, and they were duplicating other information. So the other thing is with the exam completion, you really see who needs test accommodations. More information about test accommodations, I covered that quite a bit in the webinar that I did in, I think it was early November, December, I forget, but it's up on YouTube. Okay. The specificity of the 9 categories, again, gives very concrete information that can't be gleaned from general NBCOT exam domains. This increases utility of the score report, particularly if you see patterns, as I mentioned, and these insights can inform curriculum. We do have therapy ed in our resource guides for program directors. We have curriculum course assessment forms that provide a tool that go along with review and study guides, so you can really see how your content lines up and with what's covered in individual courses, with what's tested on the exam. And this can really help you meet the new accreditation criteria that says faculty must demonstrate awareness and understanding of how the program's curriculum design is integrated into the program. Usually developing program, people are on board writing it, but after 5, 10, 15 years, people kind of sometimes drift away from that. So it can help you get back on track with that. They would develop, and they're in, again, the resource guides that I talked about. We do have a resource guide for pre-accredited accredited programs and a separate guide for developing programs, because curriculum drift is something that occurs in developing programs, and designing complete curriculum is what, curriculum drift is in accredited programs. Designing complete curriculum is in the developing programs. If you want a copy of the guide, I did send that out to all program directors in June, but if you would like your own copy, you can email me, or if you didn't receive it, let me know. And basically you go through these forms and you look at the content, strengths, and limitations, and you basically use basic symbolic scale. Plus, if you covered very well, check if you covered adequately, covered very little, not covered at all. And this is what they look like, the forms. So this is chapter 3. It goes over the real basics, okay, of the OT process. And then you get into something like chapter 5 that covers, more detail. And you may wind up saying, we cover a lot about younger children, but we don't cover enough about older children. We cover a lot about school-based, but not so much about, adolescent, elementary school. So you really get to see, what you're covering. And each chapter has a very specific listing. So again, psychosocial, and we have for biomechanical, neurological, neurophysiological, cognitive, perceptual, every chapter. Environmental. Okay, big question that comes up is, when is the best time to administer an assessment exam? 2LXs provide you the opportunity to administer at the time that's most relevant to your program-specific needs. Often I have found that schedule is often influenced by how a program integrates exam prep into their curriculum. For example, a lot of schools that I go to integrate our exam prep course into a post-academic program pre-field work course. So they put this as assessment as part of that, or how it's paid via course fees or an internal grant. The increase in secure use of remote test taking has eliminated a lot of logistical barriers. People, give a window of opportunity. The students get a code. They can go in and do it within that window of opportunity. And then the program director gets all the feedback, once everybody's completed it. However, on-site administration sometimes is preferable because it does ensure that the test taker has undivided attention in a prometric-like environment. The kids aren't in the background, the dog's not in the background, the cat's not in the background. You can do it as a real test taking, but it really depends upon where it fits in your curriculum and what resources you have. The most important thing, though, to remember, no matter what assessment exam, is you really have to know that the content knowledge and test taking skills that are required for NBCOT exam success is extensive. So a class cohort and individual student assessment exam scores reflect the amount of preparation they have completed prior to their exam. Okay, and that's true whether it's Therapy Ed's assessment exam, NBCOT's OCI, or any other assessment exam. If the exam is administered before the completion of didactic coursework or fieldwork, the student may not understand the focus. They just may not have the basic knowledge. If before they study, they may not have the where to add to, subtract to, C5, C7, remembered from their past to correctly answer, and that gap will be evident in their scores. If they haven't learned the strategies for figuring out the correct answer, how do I pick the best? Okay, that's where the exam prep comes in handy. How do I pick the best item to pick the correct answer? So if they haven't had that exam preparation on strategies, they may select incorrect answers. And if they haven't learned effective time management skills, they may run out of time. Now, sometimes when I first thought about it, I was like, why would anybody give an assessment exam before students complete field work and go out? And talking to program directors over the years, it's like, well, they're kind of a captive audience, and I want them to see how they do. And to be honest, when they see they have those low scores, a lot of times it's, wow, I am going to need to prepare and take this serious. I'm going to have to come back and take this course and go online so I know that I'm prepared and I know the test taking strategies. So kind of gives a bit of a wake-up call. So now I understand that. And in the beginning, to be honest, I didn't understand it because I always feel bad when students do poorly because they haven't adequately prepared or didn't have the time or haven't even finished their fieldwork. But now I get it. I understand it. But again, that's very individual to the program. But it can be very beneficial for squishy procrastinators because they sometimes really need that. And for students who get benefit from testing accommodations. It lets them know, maybe you really need to request that. It doesn't cost anything. All right, couple cost-saving hints. To order online assessment exams, definitely contact Betsy Pendry. And I just want to share a couple ways that OT programs and OTA programs have deferred and defrayed the cost of assessment exams for students. They've included the purchase of assessment exams in accreditation or instructional budgets. For those of you developing programs, it's great to get that in right at the very beginning, because once you get it in there, it's hard to take it away. So you want to get that in at the very beginning. They often integrate the administration of the assessment exam into a course, a professional capstone course. So it enables tuition fees and student financial aid to be used to support this. Sometimes they receive, institutional discretionary funds from Dean's funds, and Title III grant funding. Is Deb Oliveria from FAMU in Florida provided good information for the webinar that I did on November 15th with Chrissy and Doug, and she provided information about Title III grant funds, and both Chrissine and Doug talk about how they pay for this and how they integrate this integrate the course. Okay, briefly, I'm going to go over resources and then I'll open up for questions. Once you get those scores and you identify strengths and limitations, you need to say, okay, let's proactively address this. The below resources, whenever you can, help students develop those skills that they need and help them practice and develop it before they go into prometrics. So I'm going to go briefly. For those of you who are not aware, Therapy Ed does do a certification exam preparation course. It's a 1-day course for CODA, 2-day course for OTR, and it covers both aspects that are needed for success: mastering content via a targeted study plan and how to effectively answer exam items. It is taught by highly qualified educators, and it includes current information about the CODA and OTR exam to make sure they understand what's required. It's very active learning by doing. We go through a lot of questions so they learn to develop the clinical and critical reasoning for successful test taking. And it gives strategies how to break down those unique exam items that are on both the CODA and OTR exam. They're offered on-site and online. School discounts are available for a host school. The course fee does include the review and study guide and a manual that walks the students through the review and study guide and has many self-assessment and exam preparation forms. If the students do separately purchase, sometimes students get it as a graduation present. That purchase price is credited, so the $90 is deducted from their course fee, and both discounts are also available for that. An important thing to know: if students do have life happen and they don't pass the exam, NBC Therapy Ed does allow free retakes of our courses. So students, because sometimes the second time around. I'm very, very proud that in 2021, we don't have 2022 data yet, but this was when everybody was pretty zoomed out, and we had over 4,500 people take our course, and 3479 out of 4,500 actually completed the course eval, which I thought was pretty impressive, given that, you know, people were pretty tired of Zoom at that point. And out of that 3479, it's very high. It's over 97%. It's very hard to see, but one is like 97.3%, the other is 97.8%. So they would recommend the course. And program directors and deans and students are very cognizant of their budget. They only do things that work. Again, the purchase price, group discount. If an exam candidate can't attend the scheduled course, they can attend any other course. If you're doing it on-site, but this student lives in California, they can Zoom into another course. And less than 5% of our courses are closed. Usually it's because it's due to grant money, and they have that. It can only be for people who are on the grant. To help defray the course, they have, again, the course have included the same thing, same as the OLXs, included in their accreditation budget, integrated into a curriculum, used internal, external grants, same as for the assessment exams. And that helps defray the cost. The book, I'm going to be very brief, has been around for 23 years. I'm very proud of it. We provide very extensive current information about the exam. We adequately test the knowledge, and we have a lot of test taking skills. They are efficient. One single book has both practice exams and all the content you need, and it's expensive buying a lot of products. So it is something, and again, those 3 full exams are very helpful. It is daunting, the review and study guide. It's important to remind students that this whole back half of the book is the explanations for the correct answers and incorrect answers for the practice exams. We also have multiple figures and tables about what must know, and tables and hints and figures, and exam hint and caution boxes, which is very helpful for those of you who are developing a curriculum. These are things that, you know, you want to make sure you're covering your curriculum. The exam hints, as I said, put the information into the context of the exam outlines, and also identify the percentage of code as equivalent to practice analysis. So, you know, disorders that are more prevalent are likely going to be on the exam. Those are things we definitely should be teaching in our courses. We also have exam hints that basically give study strategies and how to effectively answer the exam items. You know, no penalty, take a break, not state specific. And the red flag and caution boxes. I tell the students, make sure they memorize all the red flag and caution boxes, because NBCOT exam is the licensure exam, and licensure boards and NBCOT is the certification board wants to make sure you're safe. So these are throughout the chapters, and they really highlight what is must-know information for practitioners to be safe and competent. A good thing to integrate into your program, if you do use the review and study guide and have the students do it, is at the end of chapters 3 to 15. Chapters 1 is about the exam and test taken. Chapter 2 is about exam preparation and taking the test. 3 to 15 are our content exams in the OTA, 3 to 16 in the OTR. And at the end of each chapter, there's these open-ended questions. And they're meant to engage students in thinking about the knowledge they acquire from the chapter. And these can be assigned in a flipped classroom format. So have that the students do them and independently, and then come back and discuss the answers. And the answers are provided in the appendix. The one thing I like to emphasize is, do tell your students, don't buy it from Amazon. There's a person who buys it and highly inflates the price, almost double as to what it is at Therapy Ed. And there's no guarantee you're going to get a valid code to access the online portal, which, you know, 3 exams included is quite significant. Economic way is definitely through Therapy Ed, and you can also get review copies from a program director from Betsy. Again, integrating it into a course helps defray the cost, and the bookstore can also order the review and study guides as bulk, which saves them money, and they can use their financial aid and bookstore credit. And if you are using it, you can have, if you're going to offer a course, we want the students maybe to have the book before they go out on field work or their capstone, because they can kind of review the stuff. The Therapy Ed can send the book to you beforehand, and then they just have it for the duration. Therapy Ed also offers tutoring. The best part that I think is very important about our tutoring compared to some others, it is very personalized and done by Therapy Ed course instructors who've been educators for over 30 years. They help students prepare to take the exam in a proactive manner, but also if students are struggling. But the thing that is very important is there is no pressure for students to buy packages or uptick. No one's calling them to say, do you want more tutoring? It's completely student directed. It's how much tutoring they have. And there's a good YouTube webinar that Paula presented, who's one of our tutors, on Therapy Ed's YouTube page. We do offer online office hours every Tuesday from 7 to 8 p.m. They begin with targeted must-know information. That's followed by open Q&A. And they're relevant to OT and OTA students. And besides doing the targeted content review, they do cover effective exam prep, test taking, basically any questions students have. As Donna Costa says, it's kind of a stump the instructor type thing. This is a list of our topics that we cover, and they're basically based on the NBCOT content outline and things we know that students sometimes either struggle with or don't realize they need to apply to the exam, like models of practice, or the U.S. healthcare system. And where's the U.S. healthcare? Yeah, that you need to know, Medicare, Medicaid, and IDA and ADA. So we cover all those. We do an exam item week on social media. It's posted on Thursday. Rationale is provided on Sundays. And during the office hours, the instructor discusses the correct answer. We have on YouTube, we have resources for students. The one that's really quite nice, that's up all the time, is the Mindfulness Certification Exam Preparation. That's an office hour that Donna Costa does every year. But we've kept this up permanently because people need to reflect on how to use mindfulness to be effectively prepare and take the exam. The online office hours that we do every week are recorded. They're typically posted within 2 weeks of the session and remain online for at least a month. And these are various sessions that I've done for the student conclave over the years. Okay, educators workshops that are permanently available are this one that I co-presented with Christina and Doug. That was the one that we were having trouble with, but apparently is back up and running. And this is one I did recently. This is the one for June that I did with Marlene about pragmatic guys. This is one that I talked also more about exams. And this was Inspire 2020 1 hour webinar that I did for Inspire. That is also up. It's more like a podcast though, because AOTA was an AOTA sponsored thing and they recorded it, but they didn't record the slides. But so it's good to listen to while you're chopping vegetables or in the car. Okay, the things that are the resources I want to share is I will be doing a conversation that matter at Inspire 2023 on Friday, April 21st about students who struggle and 1 to 150. And the webinar that Carrie will be doing is again on April 28th, and I will be sending out information about that. Okay, I'm going to go to chat and see before we move into conclusion, and then I have a couple of landing notes. Okay, I'm going to scroll up to see what I missed. Okay, the PowerPoint. I don't send out the PowerPoint because or shareware, but this is being recorded, so the PowerPoint slides will be available, to look at and to listen to. Okay, answer that about the OLX is only for program highlight. The program director data. Yes, you do get data about how the students perform. Yes, if students who take our course, if you took our course, not students who didn't take our course, if students take our course, they can retake the course. All they need to do is contact Michelle, who's the contact person who sends out the information about all the courses, and say, I took the course with Rita at XYZ college. I had a major trauma in my life. I was not able to focus. I didn't do good. And then she'll let them sign up.
That's sturdy.
Really?
Oh, hold on. Let me mute. Okay. And she just sends out the link. And we get it on thing that the student, will be attending from this other school. Best email is, I like to keep the RPC 1904@gmail for Therapy Ed stuff, but you'll find that once I do that, I wind up sending things through my Yahoo. But I like to know that everything through Therapy Ed initially first goes through the Gmail one. Okay, recorded resources. The recorded resources is on Therapy Ed YouTube page. How I get to is I just usually put Therapy at YouTube in my Google, and it goes right to it. Okay, I'll also be available to answer more questions, but I just want to give a brief summary. I hope this session provided you with greater understanding of the different purposes of course assessment and practice exams, clinical reasoning, and need to use course exam items that are consistent with students' developmental levels and exam preparation needs, how test-taking personalities may potentially impact by perpetuating ineffective exam prep and test-taking habits that can compromise future certification exam success. So just be aware of that when you see a student having a distinct personality, to maybe walk them through it a little. And definitely in the course, we cover that quite a bit. And it's also in the course manual. When and how different programs are integrated assessment and practicing into their curriculum. Again, the presentation with Doug and Christina is quite informative, because other program directors also sent feedback that's included in that session. And strategies and resources you can use to identify students who may struggle to pass the exam before their first attempt. And I do think our OLX score report to program directors is extremely helpful for this. And how to support certification exam success through ethical, reliable, effective resources. So as educators on behalf of the Therapy Ed team, I really ask you to consider the following questions before you recommend certification exam preparation products to your students or purchase them for your program. And again, the unethical stuff is not referring to AOTA or NBCOT, but there's a lot out there right now. You want to make sure that the preparation product includes current and accurate information about the OTR coder exam, the content format and procedures, that's well organized and integrated content that's accurate and directly relates to the content outline for the CODA, OTR, and certification exam. Our exam hints directly do that to make sure students know what they need to prioritize. That it includes effective test taking and time management strategies, help them correctly answer exam items, successfully complete the exam within the allotted time. And that the assessment practice exam accurately represent the different types of exams they'll be required to answer on their respective exam. And real-time learning, experiential learning activities, and individualized live supports as per our course. And most important are the providers' experience and well-regarded educators with established reputation for excellence, integrity, and service. I invite you to look and see who are part of the Therapy Ed team. I'm very proud of my colleagues. It is not a company that is just only hiring people per diem to write items and that's it. It's a very committed group of people who really have a culture of collaboration with program directors. So I'm very proud that the quality of our products and resources and the expertise of our course instructors and text contributors will enable you to answer yes to all of these questions. Okay, yes, I can put my email in the chat. Let me make sure it's good. I'm not the best typist. Okay. All right, do feel free to contact me. There it is up there. To contact me, RBC19 for Gmail, if you have any questions, particularly about how best to integrate Therapy Ed's online assessment exam, prep course, and/or practice exams into your curriculum, how to use our review and study guides in your program to develop students' content knowledge to support their exam success, and how to use our educators curriculum course assessment and our resource guides for program directors and educators to assess your program strengths and limitations and foster faculty's knowledge of their curriculum content and designed to meet COT standards. Information about purchasing and scheduling all goes through Betsy, okay? And she's very effective in getting back to you about discount information, how to schedule either and particularly group tutoring. In the November session, Deb Oliveri provided information also about group tutoring that she uses, as did Christina. So, hey, on behalf of Therapy Ed, I thank you for your attention and participation, and I look forward to working with you to enable your student certification exam success. Do spread the word if you thought this was helpful. And I will be sending, as I said, I'll be sending out a message once I get the link for this webinar to program directors and to anyone who I have on my email list. So if you want to be added to my email list, let me know. And if you want me to directly send you the resource guide, you can also let me know and I could attach that to an individual email. So I thank you very much, and I wish you a good semester starting up, a good spring semester. It's nice to be back on campus again. Okay, thank you.